everyone. Welcome to episode 188 of Manage the Wild. I'm your host, Nick Madsen. Today, I went out with biologists and we went classifying elk, and we were able to see a few elk, but the hunting season has started in the area that we were classifying. Elk are real skittish. We would get them within a mile in the vehicle and they would just take off. So we had a really challenging time. So we decided we would switch what we were going to do today. Oftentimes in the field, that's exactly what happens. When things aren't working out, you're just going to switch till you find something that you can do. They had a yearling bear that was causing problems, kept coming down into a smaller town. They ended up trapping it. They put GPS collar on it and they released it, and they were tracking it for a little while. But the problem with collars sometimes is they just stop functioning, and once they stop functioning, you pretty much are done for. So this collar is what they call a dual mode collar or a dual purpose collar. It has both GPS and VHF, and so if the GPS unit stops working, they can still track it by radio telemetry. Oftentimes they'll walk around with a big antenna and you'll get to the highest point and see if you can pick up its signal. So we drove all over trying to pick up this signal. And the reason why they're so interested in this yearling boar is because it keeps coming into town, and ultimately if it comes into town, they're going to have to decide whether they euthanize it or is there another location in which they can take it further away from people so it doesn't pick up those bad habits. So we went out and we went to the highest peaks that we could. But the problem with radio telemetry is if it's just on the backside of the ridge, oftentimes you can't pick up the signal. And so we drove to multiple locations. Unfortunately, today we weren't able to pick it up. But I kind of want to talk about GPS collars and how awesome they are, but some of the challenges they face. So GPS collars or radio telemetry collars often look like this. They're going to have an antenna, they're going to have a battery, and it just goes around the animal's neck like this. And wherever the animal goes, if it's a GPS collar, it'll be able to track their movements. Now, the battery life on these lasts depending on what type of data you're going after. So if you want real-time data constantly and you want to track its every movement every 30 seconds or every minute, then your battery life is not going to be as long. If you're getting 4 points a day, every 6 hours or so, then your battery life is going to be a lot longer. You just won't have that, what they call finite data. And so it just depends on what your goal. If you, like a project, Randall McBride, who we had on the program, there were certain times a day when his collars would switch from one data point to a different, depending on the time of day and the time of year, because he wanted to watch what hunters were doing when they got near the elk. He wanted to see what the elk were doing, and so he needed more finite points. He needed points that were closer together. And then during the off season, they didn't need them as much, and so you can change, go into your computer and you can change how many points you want. And if you're just looking at overall migration, whether the elk or mule deer or whatever is moving, you don't need as many points in a day because you're not caring about those little movements. You're caring about the overall season. You want the collars to last for multiple years, and so you're going to do 1 to 4 points per day. Some collars, this one's a little bit older, but some collars will have a solar panel on it, a little small thing that helps charge the battery, so some of these will last longer. You can put collars on pretty much anything. They've got little teeny backpacks for birds, and depending on how big a bird, but we've done turkeys that the backpack is actually about this size, and you just wrap it around the wings. We've put these on cougars, we put them on deer, elk, moose, pretty much anything that you can think of. They even make these small trackers about the size of a button, and they've put them on bees, and they've set up a little system, and the tracker will track the bee and see where it flies. So they can put trackers on pretty much anything. But the one challenge that we have is sometimes they fail. There was a project where they threw a bunch of collars on some deer, and oftentimes this involves helicopters or things like that, and it gets really, really expensive. And they had a bunch of collars, and they released them all, and all of a sudden the collars went bad, and they couldn't get any data. So oftentimes when the collar goes bad, they're flying their helicopter around. They fly over top of a deer if they can see that it has a collar, and they'll hover above it, and then they'll see if they can pick up a signal. If they don't pick up a signal, they'll fly down, grab the collar off the animal, swap out the collars, and they don't necessarily need to bring them in for studies. That's what they're trying to do on this bear. Because this bear is a yearling, the collar is small, so they are adjustable. But the collar on this yearling boar is very small. This year it's going to be fine. Next year it's going to start to get really uncomfortable and problematic as the boar gets bigger. It starts to bulk up. This tight collar, something like this, is not going to stretch. And so they really need to capture that boar pretty quick within the next year to swap out collars and see where that boar is going to continue to move around. So that's why they're trying to find it now. So that's how the day went. If you guys have any questions about radio telemetry, GPS collars, hit me up on Facebook or Instagram. Have a great day. Stay wild.